First, I want to welcome the visiting journalists who are part of the Shireen Abu Akleh training program for Palestinian journalists, so welcome. Tomorrow, programming note, tomorrow at 11 o'clock, there will be a briefing here by Vaclav Balek, the president of the Human Rights Council, and you're all, of course, invited. Sorry? 11, yes, thank you. The Secretary General is wrapping up his visit to the United Kingdom. He is in London, where today he took part in the UK summit on artificial intelligence safety. In the morning, he had a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak. They discussed the current situation in the Middle East, particularly the delivery of humanitarian aid to the population in Gaza, as well as the global impact of the war in Ukraine. The Secretary General also held meetings with the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, as well as the Vice Chancellor of Germany, Robert Habeck, and the President of the European Union Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. In the afternoon, he took part in the Artificial Intelligence Safety Summit sessions on AI safety priorities and in discussions on concrete ways on steps to make frontier AI safe. In the Secretary General, on the occasion of the summit, the Secretary General said that the speed and reach of today's AI technology are unprecedented, yet the paradox in that future, it will never move as slowly as it does today. He stressed that the principles of AI governance should be based on the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we urgently need to incorporate those principles into AI safety. The Secretary General emphasized that we need a sustained, structured conversation around risks, challenges, and opportunities, and he stressed that the UN, an inclusive, equitable, universal platform for coordination on AI governance, is now fully engaged in that conversation. The Secretary General also met with the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, James Cleverly, and he will be flying back to New York later today and be in the office tomorrow. Moving to the situation in Israel-Palestine, the Secretary General welcomes the continued movement of people and humanitarian assistance through Rafah crossing. It is essential to have a regular and sustained flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza at the scale needed to meet the mounting needs of the Palestinian population. Yesterday, the Rafah crossing opened for some 80 sick and wounded Palestinians in Gaza to get treatment in Egypt, as well as to a number of foreign passport holders and rotation of UN personnel. The reports that we're getting is that is continuing today. All of this is an important step in the right direction on which we need to build. Since the delivery of aid was resumed on October 21st, humanitarian convoys carrying food, water, nutrition, and medicines have entered Gaza through Rafah crossing, while fuel deliveries continue to be prohibited. The UN remains committed to continuing our intensive work with all parties to alleviate the suffering of the most vulnerable people in Gaza. Martin Griffiths, the emergency relief coordinator, called on the warring parties to agree to pauses in the fighting, adding, "It is the only viable option to get relief items into Gaza right now, alleviating people's suffering and reducing the risk of civil disorder." The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports yesterday 10 trucks carrying water, food, and medicines entered Gaza through Rafah crossing, bringing the total number of trucks to 227 since October 21. The entry of fuel, the Turkish, and also just to say, the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital in Gaza City reportedly ran out of fuel yesterday and was forced to stop most of its activities, rendering 70 cancer patients at serious risks. Meanwhile, Gaza's telecommunications and internet services were cut for about 80 hours yesterday, leaving civilians in grave danger amid heavy Israeli bombardment from air and land. The UN relief agency, UNRWA, reports that some 690,000 internally displaced people are sheltering in 149 installations across the Gaza Strip. An estimated 160,000 are housed in 57 shelters in the northern part of the Gaza and in Gaza City. UNRWA, however, is no longer able to provide services to displaced people in those areas. UNRWA, which, as you know, is the largest provider of humanitarian assistance for the UN in Gaza, still needs $100 million for its operations this year, including to pay its staff salaries in Gaza. Even as it does its work in dangerous conditions in Gaza, UNRWA lacks almost 2 months' worth of salaries for about 28,000 staff, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. The UN Environment Program today released its annual Adaptation Gap Report, which finds that progress on climate adaptation is slowing on all fronts. The adaptation finance needs of developing countries are 10 to 18 times as big as international public finance flows. That's over 50% higher than the last estimate. In a message on the occasion of the release of the report, the Secretary General stressed that action to protect people and nature is more pressing than ever. We are in an adaptation emergency. We must act like it and take steps to close the adaptation gap now, he said. The full report and ESG's message have all been shared with you. Sorry, and I should have added this to the Israel-Palestine note, but just on the northern border, our colleagues at the UN Interim Force in Lebanon continue to report exchange of fire across the Blue Line, including several instances of shelling, explosions, and gunfire that took place yesterday. Among those, 2 projectiles exploded some 10 meters from a UNIFIL position near Beit Leaf in southern Lebanon, causing significant damage to part of the structure and minor damage to some UN vehicles. The mission has also launched an investigation. UNIFIL continues to assist with efforts to evacuate individuals who are stranded near the Blue Line. And turning to Bangladesh, the Secretary General is concerned about reports of violence at political rallies in Bangladesh, in which at least 9 people have died and numerous others injured. He calls on all parties to refrain from violence. He also underscores that there should be no excessive use of force or arbitrary detention. The Secretary General stressed the need to respect the right for freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. The Secretary General calls on all stakeholders to promote a peaceful, inclusive, and credible election process. We also have an update on our peacekeeping operations in Mali. A peacekeeping convoy that is traveling from Kidal to Gao as part of a withdrawal to the mission. As you will recall, yesterday, we told you the convoy hit an improvised explosive device, and we had mentioned that several peacekeepers were injured. Today, our colleagues are telling us they have confirmed that 8 peacekeepers, in fact, were injured due to the IEDs. The peacekeepers were initially evacuated to MINUSMA's base in Gao for medical care. Today, one of them was transferred to Bamako. The troop contributing countries are impacted or also being updated as the situation develops. Yesterday's incident follows 2 similar attacks since the convoy left our Kidal camp on October 31st, which indicates the perilous nature of this journey. And following, I think, I just want to give you more update on the situation in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I think, Yvonne, you had asked about it. And I can tell you that following the government of Pakistan's announcement of a plan to deport undocumented foreigners, most of whom are Afghans, our colleagues at the UNHCR are appealing to Pakistan to continue its protection of all vulnerable Afghans who have sought safety in the country. UNHCR has offered its support to Pakistan in developing a mechanism to manage and register people in need of international protection on its territory and respond to particular vulnerabilities. UNHCR underscores that any refugee return must be voluntary, without any pressure, and to ensure protection of those seeking safety. Recalling UNHCR's non-return advisory for Afghan released in 2021 and updated most recently in February 2023, the agency calls for a suspension of forced returns of Afghan nationals regardless of their status. The role of Pakistan as a generous refugee host for decades has been acknowledged globally, but more needs to be done to match the generosity of Pakistan. UNHCR underscores that any refugee return, and also just to add that our colleagues at the political mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA, have been engaging with authorities on both sides of the border, particularly regarding the humanitarian impact. And today is the Day of International Day to End Impunity of Crimes Against Journalists. We can't emphasize enough that journalists and the media fulfill a vital role in society, upholding and enabling democracy, holding power to account. The UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization says that last year at least 88 journalists were killed for doing their job. And in his message for the day, the Secretary General notes that the current conflict in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory is taking a horrific toll on journalists. He adds that we need to have better safeguards to defend the journalists who are keeping us informed around the world, and calls on all to prevent violence against journalists, to provide a safe environment for them, and to go about as they go about their jobs, to bring justice to those who commit crimes against journalists and media workers. The silence means you can raise your hand. Yes, sir, please.
Anyways, I want to ask you about the UN Humanitarian Office. Today, they reported that Gaza's main cancer hospital ran out of fuel and was forced to stop its services, risking the lives of 70 cancer patients. What are the practical measures that UN is taking or calling for to help those vulnerable patients, the cancer patients, along with people or patients with heart conditions, dialysis for kidneys? Those are really in terrible state, health-wise.
No, I mean, and this I just mentioned. This is the hospital I just mentioned proactively about the issue regarding cancer patients because they had run out of fuel. I think this just only underscores a tragic humanitarian situation, the need for us to be allowed to get fuel in, and also the fact that you cannot, hospitals cannot be evacuated and moved. I mean, you have, whether it's people on dialysis, whether it's people in neonatal units, children in neonatal units, that just cannot happen. And it also yet another reminder of the fact that hospitals cannot be part of any combat.
Just a follow-up, sorry. Is there any way for reach out for those patients and make anything on ground?
Our colleagues, WHO and our other colleagues are doing what they can on the ground, but we're very limited in what we're able to do, sadly. Ibtisam.
Okay, so I have first a follow-up on that. So you said you were able to have about or more than 200 trucks entering Gaza, but altogether since you started, but that doesn't, before October 7th, you were actually having every day 500 trucks. So my question here, also, there are some complaints from people on the ground that saying that some of the aid that's reaching is not things that they need, like COVID tests, etc. Can you comment on that? And can you explain to us why aren't you able to get the amount of trucks you need to enter Gaza?
Well, we've been highlighting the difference in the numbers of truckloads that were going in before and after this conflict. The 500 per day roughly of truckloads that went in wasn't just humanitarian aid. It was just regular commercial traffic, right, which fueled the society and everyday living for Gazan civilians. What we are continuing to work with Israel, with the U.S., with the Egyptians and other parties to ensure that we have a system that allows for a greater volume. I mean, we've been calling for that. We fully understand the desperation of those civilians in Gaza who want to see more, aid, who need more aid. We share those feelings. after a lot of our colleagues are living there and side by side, and we're continuing to pursue that.
Okay, I have another question. It's more of a general question in a context of the trouble of the SG and his visit to Nepal. And a few things, if you bear with me a little bit. So if you look at the number of people who were killed in Gaza, it's actually surpassed now the 9,000, I think, and it's more than the number of people who were killed in, for example, in the Srebrenica massacre and genocide in 95. The UN and other genocides since this establishment of this UN, the UN is always saying, never again, we will not allow that, etc. What we are seeing now is that yes, the Secretary General did speak with clear words and asked for a ceasefire, but the videos that he posted in his account in Nepal made him look like somebody who's not connected to what's happening on the ground. Videos of him throwing flowers, etc. And if you look at the comment side in that video, is really showing that there is a problem. What do you say to that?
Look, first of all, I'm not going to question people's impassioned feelings and the comments they make. I think the Secretary General needs to be able to do many things at once. He has been continuously in touch with all of his colleagues on the ground, keeping in touch with key interlocutors, trying to increase the level of humanitarian aid, working towards a ceasefire, continuously calling for the release of all hostages. He's also dealing with another global crisis, which is the climate crisis, which is a more medium-term crisis, but he needs to be able to do both. And he has continuously, during his travels, spoken out about the situation in Gaza, and will continue to do so. And he did so in London, and he discussed this not only with Prime Minister Sunak. He discussed the situation with Vice President Kamala Harris and Ursula von der Leyen. So it's a matter of his capacity to deal with multiple crises at once.
One more follow-up on the issue of settlers torching shops and cars at the entrance of the village of Deir Sharaf near Nablus. Any comments? Thank you.
Well, we continue to condemn the violence that we're seeing by Israeli settlers against Palestinian civilians in the West Bank. I think these deplorable attacks continue to risk inflaming an already inflamed situation even further, and Israel has a responsibility to ensure the public order and safety of all who live in the occupied Palestinian territory. Alan.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions, please. The first one is regarding the Reuters publication. So the Reuters says that Qatar has mediated an agreement between Egypt, Israel, and Hamas in coordination with the US, which will allow limited evacuations from Gaza. So what is the SG's reaction regarding this agreement, and what was the role of the UN in it?
Well, we have been advocating for the sick and wounded to be able to leave, for foreign nationals to leave, for hostages to be released, and we've been doing that in our contacts with the Qataris, with the Israelis, with the US, with the Egyptians, and many others.
And the second question, if I may, it's the short one. There's been just a vote on the resolution at the GA against the economic embargo of the US against Cuba, and the results are against were only the US and Israel, and only the Ukraine abstained. What are your comments regarding the results?
I have no particular comment on the results of the vote. Tony.
Thank you, Steph. Are we going to receive any readouts from the bilateral meetings that the SG held in London including with the Vice President Harris?
Yeah, I mean, with Vice President Harris, they discussed the situation in the Middle East, including the need for greater humanitarian aid. They've obviously discussed the issue regarding artificial intelligence, among other issues.
My second question, Martin Griffith is back from his visit, and I'm wondering, are we going to get any briefing with him regarding this latest visit?
If that can be arranged, it will be arranged. Yes, sir. I'll get to you next, Mura.
Serhiy Barbu, TV Channel 5. Iran becomes chair of a UN Human Rights Forum. It's sparking an international protest campaign from human rights activists. How is it possible in Iran's case that country has huge problems with human rights? And now, thank you.
Well, first of all, who gets to sit on a committee? Who gets to sit on a council? Who gets to sit in any legislative body of the UN is a question you need to ask member states, because they're the ones who vote, they're the ones who choose. So people are responsible for their votes. Its Secretary General himself is not involved in any way, shape, or form. It is incumbent on all member states, and I would say especially those who sit on human rights bodies, to uphold the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And on Iran, I would also direct you to the report issued by the Secretary General to the General Assembly on Human Rights in Iran, which went up yesterday or the day before. Tony, just to add that they also discussed Haiti with Vice President Harris. Murad, Nabil, Yvonne, Evelyn. What? I will remember. Let's try it. Murad.
Thank you, Stephen. Several of UN experts today warned that, in a statement, warned that time is running out to prevent genocide in Gaza. I know they are independent, but any comment on that?
Listen, we have condemned the violence, and we will continue to condemn the violence we're seeing in Gaza. On the issue of genocide, on the legal issue, I've answered that question a number of times. It is not, the Secretary General does not have the authority to label, to use that word without a competent judicial body of the UN. You're right. Nabil.
Thank you. So first, to follow up on Alan's question, so do you confirm that there is an agreement now to evacuate the wounded people and foreign nationals from Gaza?
Well, I mean, I can't confirm an agreement that we're not a party to, right? I'm saying we've been discussing this with the various parties, but I also see what, with my own eyes, or at least through the television, what we've been seeing, what we saw yesterday, and we're seeing, I think, today as well.
So, so do you know if this agreement is the work frame to evacuate people from Gaza?
I can only answer what I know.
So it's not the work frame that the UN is following?
I mean, we have been advocating for this, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it happen. You know, on the Egyptian side, I mean, the border is the crossing is controlled by the Egyptian authorities, and you know, for the humanitarian stuff, the Egyptian Red Crescent has a large role and responsibility to play in that.
Mm-hmm. And another question or more. You also said that UNRWA is not able to operate in northern Gaza anymore. Can you correct me if I'm mistaken?
What we've been saying is that we do have some staff that stayed behind, but we're not able to deliver the services in a way that we would like to do, in the way we're able to do it in the southern part.
Is it because you received orders to evacuate your
Oh, because I mean, I think everything was done very publicly. We had to move a large part of our staff to the south.
Okay. And maybe a half an hour ago, number of hospitals representatives in Gaza, they said in a press conference that the convoys of wounded people are targeted by the Israeli bombing on their way to Rafah inside Gaza. Do you have any information?
I don't have
and what's
anything.
your
I
reaction?
don't have anything from that on this right now.
So what's your call to the Israeli
Well, that
forces?
people should, civilians should never be targeted, especially when they're trying to reach safety.
And last one, maybe on UNRWA casualties. I think the number now is more than 65, 70.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So are you investigating in these killings, or
So I think
what's the due
there will be a
process?
lot more clarity on this as soon as this conflict ends. Yvonne, then Evelyn.
Thank you, and thank you for the update on the situation with the Afghan refugees being deported from Pakistan. So just on that, do you think, I mean, we've heard from human rights groups that there are, amongst these refugees, there are journalists, there are human rights defenders, there are women's rights defenders, and I just wonder, does it feel like it's too little too late, given that those people have already crossed and are now at the mercy of the Taliban?
This is something that our colleagues at UNHCR have been dealing with have been following for quite some time. I mean, we do not have, we do not have the authority or the capacity to stop such a thing. I think we all recognize, and I think everybody needs to recognize the generosity of Pakistan, who for decades have been hosting Afghan population. But I think, as UNHCR said, they've asked them to put a halt on this, given the situation in Afghanistan. And it's very important that those who have protected status under refugee law that status be kept. We're of course very concerned about the kind of environment these people are going back to, especially those who have greater vulnerability for their professional activities or things they say and do.
But sorry, so just you're praising Pakistan for its generosity, but
Well, I mean, I think that
are you also
we're able to do two things at once, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm a little jumpy these days. We're able to do two things at once. I think the international community needs to recognize that Pakistan, with its own socioeconomic issues and challenges, has been hosting millions of people for a long time. And as we've always said, the developing world countries have hosted more refugees and migrants than richer countries. That doesn't stop us from also expressing our concern at what is going on now and the decisions of the Pakistani authorities.
okay? But do you consider it a clear case of refoulement in this case?
That you would have that I would ask you to ask UNHCR, because they're the competent ones to make that determination.
Okay, thanks.
Evelyn, then Stefano.
Thank you, Stéphane. In Mali, how far along are the peacekeepers in their withdrawal? And is there any overture to Russia to keep them safe, since if the armed groups are still around, we sort of know where they come from?
Well, I mean, the responsibility is for the Malian authorities, right? Those are the people we are talking to. In terms of the numbers, I think about probably about almost 6,000 out of 13,000 have left the mission, and we're continuing. But they're trying. It's worth taking a look at the pictures coming out and the challenging environment in which these long convoys, which are very vulnerable, have to travel through. Stefano.
Thank you, Stéphane. It's a follow-up on one question about Afghanistan. I remember there was the first resolution of the Security Council that was passed after the United while the United States were withdrawing from Afghanistan. They were saying that the people that wanted to leave Afghanistan had to be protected, and the Taliban had to let them go. So this, I'm sure that several of those people that are now pushed back in Afghanistan, some of them must be those people that left at that time. So if there is even a resolution from the Security Council, how is it possible that the UN doesn't do anything to, doesn't ask to Afghanistan to just obey to the Security Council resolution?
I'm not sure I follow your question, but it is responsibility of every member state to uphold resolutions that are passed. Let me go to Iftikhar, and then I'll come back to you, Gabriel. Iftikhar?
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Steph. Regarding the statement on Afghanistan and the refugees in Pakistan, the government of Pakistan has made a statement that only undocumented Afghans are being, foreigners, including Afghans, are being deported. And that no one with the protected status are registered with the UN, a refugee is not being deported. Any comments on that?
I don't think it's in contradiction to what UNHCR is saying, but I would follow up your questions with our UNHCR colleagues. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Two quick questions. I'll ask them both at the same time. Jabalia refugee camp, there are some that are suggesting that because it's been there so long that it should not be classified as a refugee camp. UNRWA does classify it as that. Can you explain from the Secretary General's standpoint why the UN classifies that as a refugee camp?
UNRWA was established before, in fact, UNHCR was established to deal with Palestinian populations that were displaced. They have the people have the status that they have through different generations, like those refugees who are registered under UNHCR.
Thank you. And yesterday, in the second briefing after you left, there was a little bit of a debate in this room about UN General Assembly resolutions and if they are legally binding or not.
Debate between whom? Between you or with Monica? Okay.
I was not involved in the debate. I was just a listener.
Yeah.
My question to you is, all you have to do is Google and go to the UN's website to get an answer to the question of if a General Assembly resolution is legally binding or not, and the answer, according to the UN website, is it is not. So I assume that that is how the Secretary General feels, and that would be your answer if I asked that question. So I guess the question is, assuming the Secretary General believes that they are non-binding, can you characterize how the Secretary General feels and characterizes General Assembly resolutions?
They should be upheld. When member states vote for resolution, where resolutions are passed in any legislative forum of the UN, they should be respected and upheld. You may, and then I'm going to hand it over to Monica.
So, just to
a little louder, thank you.
Yeah, just to honor our colleagues who were killed in this conflict and other conflicts, and because today is the International Day to End Impunity, do you have any updates on targeting a group of journalists 3 weeks ago now by the Israeli forces? One was killed, and you said that UNIFIL should
UNIFIL. No, let me try to get. I don't have an update for you on that.
Do you know if UNIFIL is doing any investigations?
I know they're looking into it, but I will give you an update. Okay, Monica, all yours.